Welcome to another adventure. Today I'm paddling up the Shoalhaven River in Morton National Park. It's a really dramatic landscape here. Got these towering sandstone cliffs on either side of the gorge. It looks even more dramatic because of last year's fires that just ripped right through this area. Every time you go around a bend of this river, it just kind of opens up and you just see more of these amazing cliffs. You know, you feel quite small in a place like this. It's a pretty humbling feeling. It's just absolutely beautiful. Just glancing up at these cliffs with all these charred trees, with all this regrowth, it looks really foreign. It's yeah, it doesn't feel like a typical eucalyptus forest. I just pulled over to stretch the legs a bit. I've been paddling for a while. Pulled over to this nice sandy little beach, but it's it's quicksand. I've completely got stuck nearly to my knees before. Yeah, so not the nice sandy beach I was hoping for. Me and my dad went on a canoe trip here about 4 years ago. I've been meaning to come back ever since, but I've never done this section of the river. This canyon is just incredible. So I'm almost at the spot where I wanted to camp tonight, and it looks like there's a few people that beat me to it. I was hoping to have it to myself, but I don't know, maybe that's a bit selfish of me. So it looks like the people at the campsite that I was eyeing off have moved along, so they must just be day trippers. I'm absolutely loving this spot. Amazing. I'm really happy with this spot, right on the water. I noticed with the square configuration, as soon as you get a bit of sideways rain, you get your hammock wet, and I wasn't keen on that, so I'm going to try out this diagonal configuration. You do get that little bit of extra length corner to corner, so yeah, we'll see how this goes.
Got this cheeky little bugger trying to steal me food out of me kayak. Making a hell of a noise.
Here's a little primitive fire kit I made, and it just involves just a leather pouch. What I've got is here is a couple of strands of jute rope that's actually been coated in wax. These are really good fire starters. You can fray out the ends and they'll take a spark really easily, and there's usually no need to use the whole thing. I usually just cut off a bit, or I'll use this to light a fire and then I'll extinguish it, saving these for later. In here I've got flint and steel. This is a striking steel, and I've got a piece of quartz and a piece of flint. Now flint isn't found locally here, so I've had to purchase this online, but quartz is really plentiful. And in this tin here, I've got some char cloth, and this takes a spark really well, and it's a great fire starter. Let's go give it a crack, shall we? You need to create essentially a bird's nest. Now this is where you'll plant your spark into, or your ember. I've never tried the she oak leaves before, so I don't actually know how effective they'll be. I was looking for some stringy bark, and I have got some around, but I thought I'd give this a crack just because I haven't done it before. I wanted to see how effective it was. So if I can't get a good flame with this, then yeah, I'll try and find some, oh there you go, some stringy bark, a big tree there, that works perfectly. I've started a few fires with that. So it's a sure thing. Now the idea is to get a piece of char cloth, and you don't need a huge amount, because once this catches a spark, it will stay alight for a while. And I'm going to try with the quartz first, and just put a piece of it here. You got to find a good edge, so it might take a while of striking before you actually find that edge. So I'll put that on there. Getting some decent sparks. Sometimes you'll find a sweet spot and it'll just spark like crazy, and other times you'll find it just kind of chips away. Sparks going everywhere but where I want it to be. Well, there we go. That's what you want. Now I'm going to put it in here and see how we go. There we have fire. It's always a really good feeling getting a fire going using primitive methods. It's so much more rewarding than, you know, just using a lighter and some fire starters. Another little gadget I picked up, it's a pocket bellows. So what it is it's steel extendable tube, and it's really effective for aerating your fire. I find that getting up nice and close and blowing on it is a good way to end up with a face full of smoke and sometimes singed hair. And this is way more effective than using your mouth because it's sort of channeled through a really small hole, so you're getting way more force than you would if you're just using your own lungs or your own mouth. It's a good way to get a lot of heat into your fire when it's in its infancy, or if it's starting to die out and it needs to be reignited. So yeah, I've found this really handy to have on this trip. It's the first time I've used it and I really love it. Smoke is always attracted to the nearest camper. It's a scientific fact. Now I always botch eggs on the fire. They always end up way too hot. I find it really hard to cook them well. I bought this little aluminium canister for coffee. Perfect for coffee, especially instant coffee, because it holds about 15 spoonfuls. Which is more than enough for 4 days. The funny thing is though, after I bought this online, I kept getting ads for like weed smoking paraphernalia. So it must be what people store their weed in. So I bought this cup about 10 years ago from Alcatraz in San Francisco, and it is the best camping cup ever. It's rock solid. I think this is a replica of what they used to make the prisoners drink from, and the idea was you couldn't break it or cut it, so it could be used for anything dangerous. So it's essentially an indestructible cup. That's pretty typical of camp toast. Oh mate, bit of salt and pepper, a little bit of black sauce. Well, there you have it, bush breakfast. When I was 2 years old, I was running along a beach and my foot went through a buried fire. From the surface it just looked like sand, and my foot went straight through into the burning hot red embers and did a lot of damage. I still have the scars today, and from time to time it still gives me a bit of trouble. So just everyone, please make sure you extinguish your fires, especially on sand. Safe. As soon as I left the banks, I had a couple of kayakers just storm the beach, so to speak. So that was good timing. Now yesterday as I was paddling, there was about 20 people, or 20 boats, just keep on going upstream, and only one of those boats have come back. So I think that the campsites up here are going to be pretty crowded, which isn't at all what I wanted. I don't mind camping with people, but for these trips away, I love to be alone. It's kind of the reason I come out here, is for solitude. How good's this tailwind? Not even paddling. In the middle of the night, I heard this huge bang, and it was one of these big boulders smashing off one of the cliffs. I just heard this big crash and just this rumbling, tumbling noise. You'd hear it just smashing trees. I don't know how big it would have been, but it was enormous, and it made me sort of think that that must happen a lot here. Completely protected from the wind in this section. This huge ridge that's stretched up here on my right. Years ago when they flooded the dam, they've obviously flooded a whole lot of trees and bushland, and over the years that has been sort of trapped under the sediment and under the water and decaying underground, and so part of that decay, it releases methane, and they'll come up as little bubbles. I've just pulled up on the bank here for a bit of lunch, and I've had about 20 other boats sort of pass me and go upstream. Extremely busy day here. One guy even had a house cat riding on his kayak, which is super weird. I don't think I've ever seen that ever. G'day. So that big crowd of people ended up paddling back downstream, which is nice. I was thinking they all might have been camping up here. There was no sign of old mate's house cat, so maybe he's left it up here. I almost got there. I got right to the end, and the kayak got stuck in a little eddy, and I was just going absolutely nowhere. Alright, I'll give it one more sprint. Second attempt successful. Now I didn't get far, but I noticed this place. Decided to give it a little look. I think it could be a good spot to camp. So here's the shelter. Just got the ridgeline strung out and the tarp up against it. So what I've done, I've pegged this thing out on an awkward angle just to make sure I've got it taut on the uneven ground. Put some rocks here and a log to keep it in place because it's also acting as a ground sheet. That was really cool. You can still hear it. There's two lyrebirds right behind the camp. They've got the most incredible call. What they do is they mimic literally everything, and they'll try and use those calls to impress a mate. Cheers.
Bloody good drop.
Now here's a little survival bracelet that I carry with me when I'm out in the bush. Now it's got a whistle, it's got a fair bit of paracord wrapped around it, and it's got a fire starter as well. What I've also done is glued a pretty good quality button compass to it. So it's nice to have all those things in one. I've really set myself a challenge. This is quite difficult tinder to light, especially that my shavings aren't super fine. and the fact that this little tiny ferro rod is very, very awkward to use, particularly when it's still attached to the bracelet. Anyway, I'm going to give it a red hot crack. I'm not holding my breath, but it's always fun to try and challenge yourself, I reckon. Well, luckily the whistle, the rope and the compass work, because that tiny little ferro rod is pretty useless. I have actually started some fires with this before. As you can see, it's pretty worn down, and I find that when ferro rods get really worn down, for some reason they're a little bit more awkward to get a good shower of sparks. I think if I use some really dry fire starters or something, I could probably get this to light, but it was just too awkward and I couldn't be bothered, to be honest. If this was your only source of fire making out in the bush, I think you'd be in a bit of trouble. If you had some really dry fine tinder and a whole lot of patience and persistence, you could get something in a pinch, but that's why I don't use this as my primary fire source. This one should do the trick. This is a homemade pouch. It was the first thing I made out of leather. A really fun hobby. I want to get some better leather now that I've kind of used some practice strips. And inside, I've got this bad boy. Now, I've had this for years. I actually got it for about $2.50. On the back here, this big silver thing, this is magnesium. So the idea is you scrape this off, and when the ferrocerium sparks hit the magnesium, it extends the life of those sparks. If you shave off a big pile of these and then get a spark into that, this will burn for probably 4 or 5 seconds. Now this thing has started a lot of fires. As you can see how worn out it is. The problem with it at the moment is when I'm striking, it's kind of made a couple of grooves, indentations, and the striker's kind of hitting those. So I think I need to sort of smooth it out to make a nice run. When it comes to ferrocerium rods, bigger is definitely better. The little one I've got on my wrist here is super awkward to use and only gives you a really small amount of sparks. Where if you've got a longer one like this, you get a much more significant result. What I'm going to show you as well, I'm going to demonstrate these jute rope sticks that I was telling you about. Here it is. You can see it comes apart really easily. You can set one aside if you want to savor it. You just untwist it. The more time you spend fraying these up, the better. Give this technique a go. The wax makes it a little bit hard to fray, so you kind of just got to sit here and unravel. Alright, we'll see how that goes. Works pretty good.